Hello and welcome to Roundtable. From Washington to Berlin, Russia has been hit with a barrage of sanctions. But at the same time, Moscow continues to sell billions in oil and gas. Has the West redeemed itself after inflicting crippling penalties? Is it willing to take a hit to its own economies? And does the Russian president even care? Good to have your company. I'm David Foster. Well, President Vladimir Putin apparently doesn't give a, well, you can probably guess, about the sanctions. The more the West pushes Russia, the stronger the Russian response will be. Well, those are the words of Russia's ambassador to Sweden, Viktor Tatarintsev. He accused the West of not understanding his country and claimed that Russia had become more self-sufficient after previous sanctions restricted trade. Now, that was before the mother of all sanctions were imposed, Russia's economy being hurt, but it is still making huge sums of money. Take a look at this. Russia exports 5 million barrels of oil every day, including 2.5 million of refined products. And that, in today's prices, is worth almost $1 billion a day. Then there's the gas, 23 billion cubic feet a day, worth $400 million a day. Putin has increasingly replaced trade in dollars with trade in gold. From a record low of $2 billion worth of gold in 1995, Russia has piled up a mountain of it, now worth $130 billion. That is 20% of total reserves. Well, we go first of all to the capital of Ukraine, to Kiev, and there we see Olexiy Haran, who's from the Democratic Initiatives Foundation, in family accommodation at the moment, but retreating, we understand. Olexiy will tell us about it, to a bomb shelter when needs must. We go to Moscow, and we see there Alexandra Fillipenko, who's from the Russian Academy of Science, outspoken over what has been happening in Ukraine. We'll talk about the reaction she's got to that. And with me in the studio, Dan Arenson, who works for the political risk consultancy GPW. Dan, I'll come to you in a little while to ask you about the actual effect of the sanctions so far and whether you think that they are strong enough. Olexiy, let me talk to you. I mentioned that you have to leave your family accommodation every now and then to take shelter in a bomb shelter. Are you feeling that you are being encircled at the moment, and that whatever sanctions there are in place just won't have enough effect in time to save you and the people of your capital?
No, we are not encircled, and actually this was Russian bluff. They said during the first days that Kiev is encircled, and unfortunately it was repeated in some international media. So please check everything. Please check everything, first of all, with Ukrainian official reports. Secondly, with numerous journalists who are on the ground here and who know the situation. By the way, I've just watched your news, and you show the map with Russian advances, and it wasn't correct because the whole Donbass was in the colors of aggressor, and it's simply not the case. So Russians are still holding about 1/3 of Donbass, but 2/3 remains under Ukrainian control. So please check everything and don't believe a single word from Moscow. This is Goebbels type propaganda. Kiev was bombed today. I hear explosions. Is more calm. Listen, I'm reading pro-Russian separatist threats Mariupol. Guys, how long would you use the word pro-Russian separatists? These are fully controlled occupied territories of Russia. It's not about pro-Russian separatists. It's about Russian troops. And it happened since 2014.
Totally appreciate where you're coming from. And I'm sure the message is getting through. I'm sure people are listening in our building and elsewhere. You mentioned Moscow. Alexandra, I want to come to you. Olexiy says, don't believe a word you hear out of Moscow. You've been very outspoken about what messages you've been hearing from the Kremlin, and he said you've been extremely brave about it. Are you worried about what's happening? I don't mean just in Ukraine, I mean to freedom of speech?
Oh, I'm to the freedom of speech. I'm very much worried. Of course, first of all, I'm worried about the people that are suffering right now. That's the main thing that I think about all the time. But of course, today we've seen a crackdown on the freedom of speech in Russia, and now there are rumors. For now, it's just rumors. But State Duma is being called to gather tomorrow, and there a lot of people say that martial law will be established with military censorship. Although, again, I have to make this disclaimer that we are talking about a special military operation. That's the official context that we're in. And the most popular Russian media, one of only opposition media channels, Echo of Moscow, was closed down today because they used the W word. They used the word war, describing what is happening in Ukraine. And we are all supposed to say a special military operation. And so that's what I'm using just of caution.
Are you personally feeling under pressure? Are you being threatened?
I'm not being threatened. I don't have any direct threats. I didn't have any direct threats, although I'm on alert and I do feel pressure, I would say psychologically for now. I didn't have policemen come to my door. I didn't have anything like that happen. But usually when it happens really quickly. But sometimes, again, judging by protests in Belarus that I've been following very closely, and I have a lot of friends who were in Belarus during August and September 2020 after the last election of Alexandra Lukashenko. So judging by those people, sometimes police just comes to your door and tells that you must come, you have to come for the talk tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. That's the way they give you a way out. They give you a possibility to leave the country. And a lot of people, I know a lot of my friends are leaving Moscow right now, or have already left. Again, out of this caution, because they are journalists or they've been working with Alexei Navalny, and Navalny's structures are now supposed to be extremist organizations. And we know that Alexei Navalny, although he's being right now, he is sentenced already, he's in prison, and he is being tried in prison again for another issue. So during those talks with the judge, he has been saying that he's against the special military operation. I'm sorry, I have to use this word and those words. And he's against what's happening, and he calls on Russians to express what they think and what they think about the situation.
I don't want to cut you short at this particular point on what you obviously feel so strongly about, but we are supposed to be on this program looking at the pressure that is being put on Putin by whatever sanctions the West has imposed. Bear with me, Olexiy, on this, because I want to hear your thoughts, and you as well, Dan. But I'm going to read out some of the things that have been imposed. Putin's assets frozen, a partial SWIFT ban, that's the International Money Transfer Organization, cross-border one, oligarchs targeted. Here in the UK, Roman Abramovich trying to offload his prized Premier League club Chelsea, probably to make sure the authorities don't seize it. And Russia's central bank also hit isolation complete because it can't get its hands on the billions it's squirreled away. The reason I read that out at this particular point, Dan, is because Alexandra there was talking about pressure. And I'm wondering whether the reason why this pressure seems to be increasing, not just perhaps in Ukraine, but also internally in Russia, is because Vladimir Putin had no idea that the sanctions would be quite so severe and so swift, for want of a better word, and he really is rather worried. What do you think?
Well, I'd agree with that. I think Putin was undoubtedly taken by surprise by the extent, and I think everybody has been, by the extent of the Western unity. I mean, the fact that Switzerland has even joined in on the sanctions is pretty notable. The fact that Serbia voted against Russia at the UN General Assembly yesterday was very, very surprising to me. I think one of the key reasons why Putin acted at this time is he really saw this as a moment of Western weakness and disunity, both between the different countries across the West, but also internally, that Governments are paralyzed by dealing with the response to COVID, the economic results of this, and also by rise of populist parties internally. So he saw this as a moment to do what he feels as
And
needed.
perhaps because nothing, well, not quite nothing, but pretty much nothing happened in 2014 when he invaded Crimea. Nothing happened when he sent his people into Georgia as well. Had sanctions, had harsh measures been imposed then, perhaps, and I'll ask this to you guys in just a moment as well, but Dan, you first, perhaps he wouldn't have been
Well, you're right.
felt strong enough to do this now.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly right about Georgia. I think with regards to after Crimea, there were sanctions for the first time imposed on Russia. They were still fairly comprehensive.
It was like being
but
hit by a wet handkerchief.
Quite possibly. And actually, the Russian government has spent the last 8 years working to mitigate that, making the Russian economy more resilient to future sanctions. One of the things it did was amass a pretty vast financial reserve within the central bank, about 630 billion, that was intended to weather any future sanctions. However, the sanctions have been so strong, most notably targeting the central bank, that actually Russia is largely unable to use these reserves that it has amassed up.
Well, I'm going to read out some of the things that they've got right now, what they've done, or what Putin has done to protect himself and the state, and to make sure he could weather the sanctions. This is what Putin has been doing since 2014 to make sure, or at least to try, that he could weather any sanctions. To make himself independent of the West, he stopped investing currency reserves in US government bonds. Russia now holding only $3.9 billion in US government bonds. It was, at one stage, $176 billion. That was back in 2010. And Russia's debt to GDP ratio, it's roughly 18%. Now compare that to the United States' 133%, and you see that Russia isn't too much in hock. And this is important too. Russia's currency reserves have hit $640 billion. That is some war chest. How much pain is going to have to be inflicted by the West to chip into that?
So I think we're already looking at a lot of pain, and that's very unfortunate for the ordinary Russians who, from what we understand, do not largely support and have not asked for this at all. I think we are potentially looking at one of the hardest falls in living standards that any developed nation has ever seen in centuries within Russia. But I think that we should be in little doubt that these sanctions are unprecedented. They are very, very tough.
Okay, Olexiy, let me come to you, because one of the notes you gave my producer was that you said he being Putin, was not expecting it to be this severe, and that encouraged him to do what he did. Your thoughts on that, and also reflect on my suggestion that had things been tougher 8 years ago when he invaded Crimea, if the sanctions had been tougher then, the penalties, he might not have been in a mind to do what he's done this last week or so.
Exactly. I fully agree with you. So, but before elaborating on that, I would like to stress that now I hear several explosions, heavy explosions. So the doors are closed, but I hear explosions. So you can imagine what the situation now in Kiev. Regarding your question, yeah, you are right. So the sanctions which arrived, they are very serious sanctions for Putin, but they are belated. If we Ukrainians, we were demanding these sanctions since 2014, in 2015, in 2018, several months or several weeks before this invasion. Unfortunately, the West was trying to have a dialogue, to soothe Putin, to make compromises. But then Putin rebuffed all the attempts for the compromises. He tried to humiliate not only Ukraine, but also Chancellor Scholz, President Macron, and all the Europeans. So I think that now, finally, there are very severe sanctions. But again, I would expand these sanctions, disconnect all banks from SWIFT, all Russian banks, freeze Russian assets everywhere, including in Turkey, close all the ports for Russian ships, ban Russian airlines. I know Europe banned Russian airlines. I'm not sure about Turkey. stop buying Russian oil and gas. So, and in this situation, frankly speaking, I don't think that Putin would be able to continue his military invasion even for 2 weeks, because even now he is in very difficult situation. Ukrainians won a moral victory, diplomatic victory. He is under sanctions. Russian economy would be collapsing. So the main problem.
Let's ask
Yes.
Alexandra about that. She's in Moscow. It's going to be very difficult to cut off energy sources such as that exists in Russia, because people need to get their energy from somewhere. It isn't impossible, though, and is that one major fear in Russia amongst the authorities, that they could one day lose the income, the massive amount of money that comes from selling their oil and gas at the moment?
Yes, probably this is the main the main point that they are the main thing that they're scared of, and I don't think that they are that much shocked by sanctions. Of course, they didn't expect that unity. I would absolutely agree with that. They didn't expect that unity, especially after President Trump didn't support, let's say, his European counterparts, and NATO was not that strong at some point. But he didn't expect the unity, and he didn't expect that harsh sanctions, probably. I'm not an economist, but I know that Russian government transferred most of the money in Chinese currency from dollars. So they were probably getting ready for something like that. They knew that they would be hit with sanctions. They just thought that they would win a fast victory. That's my feeling. I think they expected this special military operation to end very soon. That is why they tried to downplay it. That is why they forbid us from calling it a W word. That is why they try to say it's business as usual. Nothing happens. Nothing is happening. There is nothing special going on. It's just a military operation somewhere. But what I see prices rising. I see people buying food, people buying supplies, people buying TVs or computers. We know that Apple shut down their not production, but they are not selling goods anymore in Russia. IKEA is leaving, and I mean, there's a whole list of
and inflation is
yes, and
rampant.
inflation is hitting.
Let's
Yes.
ask Dan about this, because the more inflation goes up, the more the ruble goes down.
Yes.
The less access that the central bank has to any reserves that it's got, the more the pressure is going to be not only on the Kremlin, but also on Russian citizens. If you cut off oil and gas exports,
Yes.
as difficult as that might well be, would that be enough to either bring down Putin as the head of the country, or to see the war ended very, very quickly because Russia just couldn't afford it?
I mean, that's certainly the West's calculation here, because then they know that sanctions in and of themselves are never going to prompt a change of mind by the Kremlin. That would be suicidal right now for Putin to suddenly reverse. And I think he cannot be seen to be defeated, because then I think that would be the most immediate risk of a Kremlin coup. If he is seen
But if he can no longer afford to prosecute the war because he doesnn't have any money, because the country doesn't have any money and inflation is rocketing, the Russian people turn against him, where does that leave him?
So you're absolutely right. He's going to have pressure at some point, I think ordinary Russians are going to become under such financial pressure that despite any, and we hope there isn't martial law tomorrow, but as you say, it's quite possible, if ordinary Russians, they become so desperate that they actually lose that sense of fear. Oligarchs themselves become, if they are losing so much wealth and unable to access much of their wealth in Europe, there is going to be an intense amount of pressure. But Putin will always prioritize funding the security forces and funding the military in Ukraine, because he cannot afford to be seen as a defeat, because that will be the swiftest blow.
Okay, can we ask Olexiy this one then? Given the fact that it's been suggested in many quarters that Putin is under pressure, that the army isn't performing as perhaps he might have wanted, that the campaign isn't going the way that he and his generals would have liked, that inflation is rocketing, the ruble's diving, the central bank can't get to its money. Do you think the people of Ukraine are hopeful that this kind of pressure may well bring about an end to the invasion, and an end to Putin's warmongering?
Look, we definitely, as I have said, the sanctions are belated, but we do appreciate what is right now. We cannot decide for Russians when to go to streets and how to organize protests. Unfortunately, many people in Russia, they still do not understand what's going on. Today, finally, on the 8th day of war, I talked to my cousin in Russia, and he's fully under Putin's propaganda. So he believes that Ukrainians are shelling themselves, that we are Nazi and all this stuff. I sent him several links with videos and photos. Perhaps he would be able to think about that. But he's an educated person, and he still believes in Putin's propaganda. So this is not an easy task. First of all, we need to rely on ourselves. Ukrainians are, the support of the country is huge. 90% of Ukrainians, according to the poll which was conducted 2 days ago, they believe that Ukraine would win. 80% are going to take arms. We see Ukrainians who are coming back from Europe. 80,000 of Ukrainians are coming back from Europe to participate in the defending of the country. So people are standing in lines just to take guns. So the enthusiasm is huge. So first, this is the first factor. The second factor definitely is Western support. And then it comes for Russians, what to do. Frankly, I hope that there would be at least domestic coup d'etat. I understand that even people around Putin, they feel really badly. Maybe not Lavrov, who is saying crazy things, but these oligarchs, they are losing billions. They are losing their status. Oligarch Abramovich is selling his Chelsea football club. So they are prohibited to use their planes. They cannot go by their planes to Europe. I hope Turkey would join us, the other countries. So hopefully it would be possible to remove Putin from power. How
It's
would
very
happen,
difficult.
I don't know.
It's very difficult for me to put a question to you, Alexandra, without perhaps putting you in a spot that you don't want to be in. But I would like you to think carefully while I quickly talk to Dad over here about how you would respond and describe. You can't describe an atmosphere, but you can assess the situation within Russia from both the people and the politicians' point of view. Have a think about that, and I'm just going to come to you, Dad. Before we came in the studio, you told me that you knew of somebody in Ukraine who tried to get out of the country and couldn't because he was of a certain age. What was the story there? He was with his family?
So he was trying to take his family out into Poland to safety with his wife and young daughter. And yes, all men under a certain age, I believe it's under 60, are not able to leave. So he obviously parted. And it's these type of human tragedies that is pretty hard to conceive, really.
Indeed, everybody affected in some way.
I need to respect what my colleague said, because he said it's not allowed for people under 60 to leave Ukraine. This is totally understandable. So we announced mobilization. So yes, they are able to bring families to the border, and then they need to come back. It's not necessary for them to go to the army to take the arms, but at least they could do a lot of other work.
I haven't given you very long, Alexandra, but is it still your belief that people are 100% behind the Kremlin, perhaps because they've been given no other information upon which to make that judgment? Or are things shifting?
For now, I would say that yes, most people do believe. And I think because we see the inflation, but not yet. I'm sure that, as we say in Russia, refrigerator would win over TV. So refrigerator would win at some point, and lack of food or huge food prices, this would make people think, of course, or try, at least maybe they will try to understand why this happened.
And just a very quick yes or no, if you don't mind, we have no more time. Do they have no ability to get outside sources on this to watch Western news? Yes, no?
Most Russians know. I would say 70% no. 70% no. First of all, the language barrier, and also not a lot of people look for other sources. They
Okay.
just rely on TV, on state TV.
Thank you for clearing that up. Much appreciated. Stay safe in Kiev. Keep us informed, and likewise, Alexandra in Moscow. Thank you for coming on the program. We understand what you're saying and what you're showing us. Oleksiy, thank you very much indeed. And here we are in London, completely shielded at the moment. Dan,
Yes.
thank you very much for
Thank
coming
you.
on the program. Listen, thank you wherever you're watching this edition of Roundtable. We will continue to bring you the background, what you don't necessarily see in the headlines or hear on the TV, on this program, Roundtable. From me, David Foster, and the team. Good